thy name. Holla be thy name. Holla be thy name. React and get game. Holla be thy name. Holla be thy name. Holla be thy name.
What's good, family? It's your boy Holla Be Thy Name. It's time to react and get this game. So we have American Scholar here today, man. He's going to be talking to us about the bone-chilling history of the U.S. on the topic of morality. And he's just going to be telling you about what really been going on, what's really been done, and what we have to look forward to in the U.S., especially when you're talking about divine justice. But without further ado, we're going to get right into it.
About this situation. This isn't speculation. This is not opinion. This is simply what the law states. This is what the law dictates. So, for example, there would never even be any question about an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. In fact, an unconditional ceasefire would have been imposed on Israel. Under the Fourth Geneva Convention, collective punishment, indiscriminate bombing, and targeting of civilians, these are war crimes. Meanwhile, this is exactly how Israel has conducted its military campaign in Gaza. That's literally their approach. Entire families wiped out, hospitals bombed, food supplies blocked, and so on. Okay, these are not just tragedies. These are crimes under the law, and it's not ambiguous, and it's not open to debate. It's literally what they have been doing. And of course, by law, the occupation itself is illegal. Israel must withdraw under the law. Again, that's not an opinion. United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 demanded that Israel withdraw from the territories that it occupied in 1967. That was nearly 60 years ago. The occupation is illegal under Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which explicitly prohibits any occupying power from transferring its own population into the occupied land. But every settlement in the West Bank and East Jerusalem is a war crime. This is not an opinion. If international law were applied, then all of Israel's settlers would be forcibly removed. The Israeli military presence in the West Bank would have to end immediately, and Palestine would have full control over its land, because that's the law. For over 17 years, the Gaza Strip has been under siege. Israel controls its borders, its airspace, its coastline. Again, the Fourth Geneva Convention makes it very crystal clear. Blockading a civilian population, depriving them of food, depriving them of water, depriving them of medicine, depriving them of energy, these are war crimes. The UN has described Gaza as an open-air prison, as we all know. The International Criminal Court has already stated that the blockade of Gaza is a crime against humanity. According to international law, Israel should be compelled to lift the siege against Gaza immediately, not an opinion. We don't need more investigations. We don't need more reports. The evidence of war crimes is overwhelming. Hospitals bombed, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, journalists, doctors, children killed in indiscriminate airstrikes. Under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, these are not just military actions. Again, they are crimes. Israeli leaders, Netanyahu, Gallant and others, every general who has ordered attacks on civilians should be indicted and prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. Under universal jurisdiction, any country could arrest Israeli officials and hold them accountable. The forced displacement of Palestinians is not just a moral outrage, it's a violation of international law. UN Resolution 194 guarantees the right of return for refugees to their homes. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrines the rights of all people to return to their homeland. Yet Palestinians are denied this right, while Israel brings in settlers from all across the world. That's against the law, period, not an opinion. Palestinian refugees should be allowed to return home, and Israel should be required to compensate those who have suffered generations upon generations of displacement, because that's the law. I mean, what happened when Russia annexed Crimea? Immediate sanctions. What happened when Iraq invaded Kuwait? Well, there was a full-scale international military response. What happened when South Africa was under apartheid? A global movement of boycotts, a global movement of divestment and sanctions. Yet when Israel violates every principle of international law, instead of being punished, it's rewarded with billions of dollars, billions in military aid, billions in trade agreements, and diplomatic protection. Well, this is the double standard. If international law were to be applied fairly, Israel would face a total arms embargo. All economic and military ties would be severed until it complied with the law. So again, you can have whatever opinion you want to have about this, but it is the law. If your opinion does not align with the law, well, this is where you prove whether or not you want to belong to the law-abiding nations of the civilized world, or you want to be an outlaw, you want to be a renegade, you want to be a criminal. This is where that becomes clear, because look, you can agree or not agree, but when it comes to the law, you're supposed to adhere to it either way. Israel's violations of international law are not just about crimes of war, they're about preventing the very existence of Palestine. But the law, again, is clear. Palestine has a right to statehood under UN Security Council Resolution 242 and 338. Palestine is entitled to sovereignty. Under the ICJ's ruling in 2004, Israel's wall in the West Bank is illegal and Palestinian land must be returned. These are not opinions. This is legal justice. Under the law, Palestine should be immediately recognized as a fully independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. There should be no negotiations on this. In fact, just enforcement of the law. Understand, none of this is radical. None of this is controversial. It's simply what international law demands. It's what international law states. And we should always focus on this when we talk about Palestine, when we talk about Israel. In my opinion, we should focus on legal justice instead of on moral justice. Again, under international law, Israeli leaders should be prosecuted for war crimes. Israel should withdraw from all occupied Palestine. The Gaza blockade should end immediately. Palestinian refugees should be returned to their homes. Israel should face global sanctions and economic pressure until they comply, and a Palestinian state should be fully established. All of this is well established, all of this is understood, and all of this is accepted by everyone in the world except by the ones who are breaking the law. The ones who are breaking the law don't want to talk about the law. Instead, they want to talk about subjective, emotional, and ambiguous, debatable interpretations of right and wrong, and justifications for what they do, and so forth. They want to keep the discussion in the realm of opinion, when in fact opinion is irrelevant in any matter where the law is clear. Opinion is irrelevant in any matter where the law is clear. That's the thing. Where there's a law, when legal justice exists on something, then there is no point in arguing about anyone's subjective sense of moral justice, because we've all agreed to abide by the law. You understand? We have all agreed to adhere to the law. And as Muslims, we have a religious obligation to abide by the agreements, by the treaties and the contracts and so forth that we have signed. Now, the people who wrote these laws, who wrote these treaties, are continuously themselves breaking the treaties, breaking the agreements. But we genuinely believe in the rule of law. As Muslims, we genuinely believe that agreements are binding. And like I said, violating or breaching an agreement is much easier to prove than trying to convince someone about the morality or the immorality of an action. So you see the difference between moral justice, or a subjective sense of justice, a sentiment, a feeling, an emotion about what's right, an emotion about what's wrong, as opposed to legal justice. Legal justice is more cut and dry. I remember when I was a little kid in school, we had a classroom court system where we had students assigned as police who would give any kid in class a ticket if they broke a classroom rule. And then every Friday, we would have court. You had a student who was assigned the role of the judge, and you had a student who was assigned the role of a defense advocate, and so on. And the issue of their rule breaking would be addressed in a sort of mock trial every Friday. I was the classroom prosecutor. So when someone threw trash on the floor, or so-and-so was chewing gum or what have you, whatever the case may be, I would be the one to prosecute that. So the defense advocate or the kid himself would come up with all sorts of reasons why they did what they did, why they broke the rule, which to my thinking was just an admission of guilt. Case closed. Khalas. You broke the rule. Your reasons are irrelevant. How you feel about it is irrelevant. The rule is the rule, and you did not follow the rule. Case closed. And I never lost. because it's clear cut. See, once you have agreed to the rules, you are bound by the rules. So yes, you should scrutinize the rules very carefully before you agree to them. Now, America, and obviously Israel, they never had to scrutinize any of the rules because they never expected to be bound by the rules. They only expected the rules to only ever be applied and to only ever be enforced on everyone else. But no, the rules are the rules, and when you break the rules, it's clear, and there's nothing dubious about it. Now, in a dispute, the judge can decide whether to grant clemency or leniency or what have you, but clemency or pardon or leniency or any of these types of measures cannot be granted to anyone before trial. There may be mitigating circumstances and so on, but that has nothing to do with the establishment of the fact of lawbreaking. Do you see what I mean? And you know, this should not be a foreign concept for Jews. Religious Jews are very much about the law. They understand the concept of the rule of law very well. And obviously so do we. So do Muslims. There's no people on the face of the earth who understand the rule of law more than Muslims, in fact. Legality and jurisprudence are major defining aspects of our religion. And this brings us to the issue of divine law, or epochal justice. What I mean by that is the embedded system of balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has built into creation. That's what justice is really about. It's about balance. It's about restoring balance when the actions of people or the actions of nations have caused an imbalance. And this balancing is inescapable. Even if it comes over the course of generations, balance will be restored. You know, you have this idea about how the sins of the father will not be visited upon the son. But I think that you misapply this idea. Because what we're talking about, again, is balance. Or you can think of it in terms of debt. When you do wrong, when you take someone's right, when you incur a debt, you are in debt to that person or to those people whom you have wronged. And that debt must be paid. And it will be paid willingly or unwillingly. And yes, if you die in that debt, the debt isn't canceled. Your debt will be collected from your descendants. And that applies on the level of nations just as it applies on the level of individuals. This is something, again, that we as Muslims understand very well. No one gets away with anything, period. No one gets away with anything. You know, there's a fascinating hadith in which all three concepts of justice overlap: the moral justice, the legal justice, and divine justice. Rasulullah ﷺ said, sometimes you people come to me with your disputes, and one of you may be more eloquent or more persuasive than the other. And so I may judge in his favor because of this, because of his eloquence, because his argumentation is so persuasive. And by judging in his favor, I may give him a right that's not his right. So basically, beware of accepting a judgment which gives you what you have no right to have. Because if I judge in your favor and you're in the wrong, then I'm only judging on your behalf and giving you a piece of the fire. In other words, don't let your subjective sense of moral justice cause you to demand what isn't your right to demand through legal justice. Because in so doing, you may put yourself on the wrong side of divine justice. And every form of justice is flawed except for this. So take that seriously. Take that very seriously. This should be a restraining factor on your volatile sense of moral justice. And it should be a consideration when you're dealing with legal justice. So the most important thing is always going to be to try to be on the right side of divine justice. Because if you're not only putting yourself in debt, but you are potentially betraying your own descendants for generations to come. Because they will experience the rebalancing of what you and your people put out of balance. Please understand me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us against a fitna, an affliction, a tribulation, a strife, or what have you, that will not only afflict those among us who do wrong, but will afflict everyone writ large. And that happens when the people do not immediately and urgently try to prevent each other from committing actions that put the balance of justice out of kilter. You have allowed the balance to become so imbalanced, so lopsided, so skewed, you have allowed even just a few of your people to do that, such that now everyone has to go through the rebalancing, even though they themselves did not commit the actions that caused the imbalance. You understand? So literally, if you care about your children, if you care about your grandchildren, then you have to do all that you possibly can do today, to make sure that your generation is just, to make sure that you do not bequeath to your offspring and to their offspring a debt of wrongdoing, a debt of imbalance, a debt of injustice that they will have to pay. Otherwise, I'm telling you, you are betraying your own unborn descendants. And again, I know that this is something that the Jews must understand. After all their centuries of experience, they have seen with their own eyes and they have felt with their own lives the reality of epochal justice. They have strayed and been disciplined. They have disobeyed and been punished. They have done wrong and they have been chastised over and over again. And their whole book is a chronicle of this phenomenon. Why their whole history is nothing but a testament to this reality. So they know this. They know this very well. They know this just as surely as we do, that no one gets away with anything. Even their enemies who transgressed against them, whether it's Fir'aun or whether it's the Nazis. I mean, look at how pathetic the state of Germany is today. The whole of Europe used to tremble at the terrible power of the Third Reich. Now Germany is a laughingstock today, and it's killing itself by 1,000 cuts in front of the whole world. Wallahi, divine justice is real, and it's inescapable, whether you're on the right side of it or the wrong side of it. Allah will balance out the scales of justice, even across generations. The Jews know this, and they know that what they're doing in Palestine right now is doing nothing but earn their own progeny hardship and misery. You can't possibly be that blind to history and that ignorant about your own book and the chronicles of your own people. I mean, you know perfectly well that you are actually condemning yourselves and condemning your own descendants by the injustice that you're committing in Gaza, the injustice that you're committing in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, and so on. The Jews know this perfectly well, wallahi. You are sentencing your children and your children's children to a debt that they will have to pay because of your actions. You know this because it is a pattern that plays out again and again across your history. I mean, it plays out again and again across all of human history, but you wrote it all down. And you supposedly study it. You supposedly study the history of your particular people, so you have no excuse. When you have done wrong in the past, you have faced the consequences. And when you have been wrong, well, consequences have struck those who have wronged you. That's what your whole book is about. And you know very well that what you're doing today in Gaza is wrong. And you know that you've been wrong for a whole century in Palestine. And the consequences are going to be inescapable, just as they always are. For you, just as they are inescapable for everyone else. And no, I'm not forgetting about America. The same applies to you. The same applies to America. You're not getting away with anything either. I mean, do you really believe that you got away with the genocide of the Native Americans? Do you really think that you got away with chattel slavery? Do you really think that you got away with the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? You think you got away with that? Do you really think that you're getting away right now with the genocide in Gaza that you're enabling? Every single thing that you have done, every grotesque injustice that you have committed as a nation is going to fall upon your heads. In fact, it's already happening. Oh, it's an evil nation that tells its people that there's never going to be a reckoning. It's an evil nation that tells their own people that they're above the law, that tells them that they're unaccountable, that tells them that they will never face the consequences of their actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Anbiya about the fate of all of those nations who wielded injustice as their weapon and who thought themselves to be immune to accountability. All those nations before who persisted in their crimes until the punishment was upon them. And when the punishment came, they fled, or they tried to flee. And Allah told them, don't flee. Return to your homes, return to your luxuries, where you used to live, so that you can be questioned. But then when it was too late, when their doom was already sealed, then they cried out, woe to us. Indeed, we were the wrongdoers. You know, I had a post on TikTok the other day, an excerpt from a recent video where I proposed the idea that the American citizens should be allowed to sell their citizenship to foreigners for money. So then they could take that money and escape from the United States and go somewhere else and get out of that country. You know, within minutes, that post had tens of thousands of views, tens of thousands of likes, shares, and comments. And almost all of the comments were from Americans saying that they would sell their citizenship in a heartbeat. And they'd be on the next flight out if they could get out of America. They wouldn't look back. They'd say they'd leave with just the clothes that they had on their back. Because this is fleeing from the punishment that they know is descending on that country. You were warned when you slaughtered the Native Americans of that land and built your empire on their bones. You were warned when you enslaved millions of Africans, stripped them of their humanity, and treated them like commodities. You've been warned when you waged wars of conquest, when you funded dictatorships, when you propped up apartheid regimes, when you crushed entire economies to maintain your dominance. You were warned when you supported the occupation of Palestine, when you armed the murderers of children, when you justified genocide and you justified ethnic cleansing as self-defense. For generations, you've played God upon the earth, believing yourselves to be above consequences, believing yourselves to be above judgment, above retribution. You thought that justice was something that you could impose upon others, but never something that could be imposed upon you. And listen, understand, your problems, your wrongs are not mistakes. No one forced you to commit those crimes. You know, no one put a gun to your head and forced you to treat other human beings like livestock. The racial problem in America wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misstep. Do you understand? It was a deliberate, created injustice. You created this problem, and you worked hard to create this problem. You didn't just hate African people, you concocted a whole quasi-scientific rationale to justify it. You willfully interpreted your religious text to try to justify it. You built a complex propaganda, indoctrination, brainwashing, miseducation system to try to implant it into the minds of your people, to reinforce the evil. Do you understand? You did this with commitment. You worked diligently, relentlessly, and invested massive energy, time, money, intellect, and effort to enforce, to maintain, and to preserve the injustice you created. And you created an economic system, a machine for managing your economy through war, through torture, through maiming, crippling, killing, and carnage. No one made you do that. You chose to do that. And you maintain and defend that system until today. You can't just say, oops, and let's move on. You have never addressed what it is about you that made you choose to do these things, that made you create these injustices, that made you systematize these injustices and protect them for decades upon decades. It's like a degenerate gambler, you know, addicted to gambling. And he thinks that if he can find some kind of way to pay off his debts, if he can find some way to get his house from being foreclosed, it means he solved his problem. No. His problem is his addiction to gambling. So America, you have never addressed what is internally wrong with your culture, with your so-called civilization that has made you do these things, that has made you do the things that you have done. Not to mention, like I said, you have never actually ever even stopped doing those things. But you think that if you can just keep kicking the can of consequences down the road, then you never have to change. This is what you think. You think that you're succeeding. You think that your way is working. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He did not create the heavens and the earth and everything that is in between them in play, in jest, in amusement. The world is not a playground for your power. The world is a stage for divine justice. The laws of history are not written by your institutions. They are decreed by the one who governs the cosmos. And when the balance is broken, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restores it through whatever means necessary. And now, America, you're beginning to see the consequences. in America. The cracks in your empire are showing. Your economy is crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. Your political system is paralyzed. It's been hijacked by oligarchs. Your streets are filled with rage and division and despair. You're witnessing the slow dismantling of the very power that you wielded against others. Now you cry out, woe to us, indeed we were wrongdoers. But it's too late. You failed to make amends. You failed to atone. You failed to repent. Instead, you doubled down on your tyranny. You waged new wars. You funded new massacres. You armed new oppressors. You stood by and cheered as Gaza was burned to the ground, as hospitals were bombed, as mothers cradled their dead children in their arms. And you called all of this security. You called all of this defense. But what it is in reality is the final chapter of your arrogance before the punishment. And now the rebalancing has begun. Allah said we hurl the truth against falsehood and it crushes it, so it vanishes. So woe to you for what you describe. The balance of the world is shifting. The oppressed are rising. The global order that you enforce through lies, through carnage, and through exploitation, it's disintegrating. Your arrogance has sealed your fate. And now the truth that you suppressed is crashing down upon you. For the believers, for the Muslims, this is a reminder. The justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inevitable. The powerful nations that commit oppression are not invincible. They're not immune. They're just waiting for their reckoning. And for those people who still stand with injustice, return to your homes, return to your luxuries, return to your comforts. If you
Boy. Hey, man. He done touched it all. Like, it's hard to even like think that these people would think that they never gonna see the repercussions of their actions. Like, divine justice is a real thing. Like, God sees all, whether you believe it or not. It really doesn't matter. In your life, you have seen the consequences of people reaping what they sow. It just is what it is, whether it be good or bad. This is a very, very, very powerful speech. But until next time, man, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the bell so you're always notified whenever we drop these daily videos. And I'm gonna go ahead and drop the Cash App down in the description. And now we're not looking to like come up off this thing, man. Send $1. If you could send a penny, man, that'd be cool. But send $1 and put a message in there. Whatever the message is, I'll read it in the next video at the beginning. And we're just gonna go ahead and keep doing this, building the community, learning, and expressing our opinions. Drop some comments down below on what you think about this video as well. But until next time, I'll holla.
Holla be thy name. Holla be thy name. Holla be